"We've already divided everything up," my son Julian announced, his arms crossed, wearing that cold stare I never thought I'd see directed at me. We were in the living room of my own home, surrounded by lawyers and papers scattered across the oak table Robert and I bought 30 years ago. "You weren't included for a reason, Mom," he continued, while Veronica, his wife, smiled at his side with that venomous satisfaction she always hid behind her sweet words. My other two children, Matthew and Emily, remained silent, looking away as if they couldn't meet my gaze. The air grew thick, almost impossible to breathe. I felt the walls closing in on me. But then, Dr. Samuel Harding, the family's lawyer, frowned as he reviewed some documents in his briefcase. "Wait a moment," he said in a grave voice, and the silence that followed was so deep I could hear my own heart beating. "There's something not right here." He looked up at Julian, then at me, and his next words hit like a lightning bolt in the middle of the storm. "Miss Eleanor, your name is the only one on your husband's will. You inherit the $5 million. The entire estate is yours." The room fell into a mortal silence. My children's faces went from triumph to disbelief in a matter of seconds. Julian opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Veronica turned as pale as if she'd seen a ghost. If you've ever felt your world collapse and rebuild itself in the same instant, if you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own life only to discover you were the only one who mattered, then you'll understand what I lived through that day. But let me tell you how I got to that moment, because this story begins much earlier, in the days when I still believed a mother's love was enough to keep a family together. Robert and I met when I was 24 years old. He worked in construction, a humble man who barely had enough to eat but dreamed of building an empire. I was an elementary school teacher, earning little but loving my job. We married in a simple ceremony, with barely 20 guests, and began our life in a 2-bedroom apartment downtown. We had nothing, but we had everything. Robert worked from dawn until dusk, and I waited for him every night with dinner ready, listening to his dreams, his plans, encouraging him when exhaustion overcame him. 2 years later, Julian was born, our first son. It was the happiest day of our lives. I quit my job to take care of him. Robert insisted I stay home, that he would provide for us, and so he did. Little by little, with sacrifice and determination, Robert began to grow. He went from a laborer to a foreman, then bought his first property to renovate and sell. The business prospered. Matthew and Emily arrived, and our family was complete. I was happy being a mother, being a wife. I never cared about not having a professional career outside the home, because my career was my family. Every meal prepared with love, every scraped knee bandaged, every homework assignment checked, every sleepless night when one of them was sick. That was my job, and I did it with absolute devotion. Robert became a successful businessman. He bought properties, renovated them, sold them, or rented them out. His real estate business grew into a solid company. We moved to a bigger house, then to a mansion in the best neighborhood in the city. The children went to the best schools, had everything they needed and more. But I remained the same Eleanor. I never let the money change me. I kept cooking, cleaning, caring for my family. Robert offered me maids, drivers, but I only accepted help for deep cleaning. I did the rest myself because it was my way of showing love. The children grew up surrounded by comforts Robert and I never had. Julian studied business administration at a private university. Matthew graduated with an engineering degree. Emily studied interior design. We paid for everything, every tuition payment, every book, every whim. We never asked for anything in return. We just wanted them to be happy, to have the opportunities we didn't. But something changed in them over time, especially in Julian. When Julian married Veronica, I tried to welcome her with open arms. She was a beautiful, elegant woman, but there was something in her eyes that unsettled me. She came from a wealthy family that had lost its fortune, and she seemed to resent the world for it. From the beginning, I noticed how she looked at our house, our things, as if she were calculating, taking inventory. Robert noticed it too. That woman only sees dollar signs, he told me one night. But Julian was in love, or so we thought, and we didn't want to interfere. Children have to make their own mistakes, learn their own lessons. Veronica began to poison Julian slowly. Subtle comments about how I had never worked, about how easy it was to be a housewife with money, about how Robert had sacrificed alone to build the family empire. As if my 48 years of dedication were worth nothing. Julian started to change. He became distant, critical. He questioned Robert's decisions in the business, wanted more control, more power. Robert put him to work in the company, gave him responsibilities, but Julian always wanted more. Matthew and Emily also started their families. Matthew married a sweet woman named Andrea, and Emily married a hard-working man named Adam. They were different from Julian and Veronica, more humble, more grateful. But Julian's influence was strong, and slowly he began to sow doubts in them too. Family dinners became tense. Veronica made comments about my clothes, about the way I spoke, about my old-fashioned habits. Julian backed her up with laughter and nods. I tried to ignore it, to smile, to keep the peace. Robert grew increasingly angry with their attitude, but I asked him for calm. "There are children," I'd say. "They just need to mature." But Robert saw something I refused to see. He saw the greed growing in Julian's eyes, the way Veronica calculated everything we had, how they began to ask about inheritances, about wills, about who would get what when we were gone. "Eleanor," Robert told me 6 months before he died, "I have to arrange some legal matters." I didn't think much of it. I thought it was business stuff, company papers. I never imagined what he was really doing. My husband fell ill suddenly. A massive heart attack left him in intensive care for 2 weeks. I didn't move from his side for a single second. I slept in a chair by his bed, talked to him, begged him not to leave me. The children visited, yes, but they never stayed for more than an hour. They always had excuses, commitments, things to do. Only I was there every minute, holding his hand, reminding him of all our years together, asking him to fight. Robert improved temporarily. We returned home, but he was no longer the same. He was weak, tired. The doctors said his heart was badly damaged, that he had to avoid stress. I became his nurse, his constant companion. I cared for him with the same devotion I had cared for our children when they were babies. One night, a few weeks before his death, I heard voices in his study. It was late, past midnight. I got closer and recognized Julian's voice. He was arguing with his father about the will, about the inheritance, demanding to know how much he would get. Robert replied with a firm voice, "Everything I have, I owe to your mother's support. She sacrificed her life for this family." Julian stormed out of the study that night. He didn't say goodbye to me. He barely looked at me. And in his eyes, I saw something that broke my heart. Pure resentment. Resentment toward me, his own mother. Robert died 3 months later, on a quiet April morning. I was by his side, holding his hand as I had for 48 years. His last words were for me. "Forgive me for what's coming, my love. But trust me, I'll always protect you." I didn't understand what he meant. I thought they were the confused words of a man saying goodbye. I cried on his chest until the nurses gently pulled me away. The funeral was elegant, just as Robert would have wanted. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects, business partners, employees, friends of decades. I was dressed in black, in a dark gray dress Robert had given me years ago. I stood firm throughout the ceremony, receiving hugs and condolences, being the strong widow everyone expected me to be. But I noticed something strange. Julian, Veronica, Matthew, and Emily kept their distance, forming their own group. They spoke in hushed tones, passed papers, made phone calls. When I tried to approach, the conversation stopped abruptly. "It's nothing, Mom," Julian would say with a forced smile. "Just some company business Dad left unfinished." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. I had just lost the love of my life, and I couldn't bear the thought of my children hiding something from me. So I nodded, went back to receiving more condolences. And I tried to ignore the feeling of unease growing in my chest. The days following the funeral were a silent hell. The house felt empty without Robert. Every corner reminded me of him, every object held a memory. I would wake up at night expecting to find him beside me, and reality would hit me all over again. I was alone. My children barely called. When they did, the conversations were brief, distant. "How are you, Mom?" "Fine, son." "Good." "I have to go, I'm busy." And the silence would devour me again. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received a call from Julian. Mom, we all need to meet. There are important matters to resolve regarding Dad's inheritance. I felt immense relief. Finally, my children were worried about me, about how we would manage everything without Robert. Of course, son. When do you want to meet? This Saturday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. At your house? Something in his tone seemed odd, too formal, too cold, but I attributed it to grief. We all process death differently. I spent the next few days cleaning the house, preparing everything for the family meeting. I cooked my children's favorite dishes. I baked the chocolate cake Julian loved so much as a child. I wanted them to feel the warmth of home, to remember that we were still a family despite Robert's loss. I put fresh flowers in every room, took out the family photo albums. I needed that afternoon to reconnect us. Saturday arrived, and with it, a strange feeling in my stomach. I dressed carefully, choosing a cream-colored outfit Robert always said made me look radiant. I put on light makeup, did my hair. I wanted to look good for my children, to show them that even though I was devastated inside, I was still strong. At 3 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened the door expecting to see my 3 children with their families, ready for an intimate, comforting gathering. But what I saw left me frozen. Julian and Veronica entered first, followed by 2 men in suits I didn't know. Matthew and Emily came in behind them, but none of them greeted me with the warm hug I expected. Just brief nods, gazes that avoided mine. "Mom, these are the family's lawyers," Julian said, gesturing to the 2 men. "They're here to help us resolve Dad's legal affairs." My heart began to beat faster. Lawyers? Why did we need lawyers? Robert always handled everything with Dr. Samuel Harding, the trusted attorney who had been with us for 20 years. "Where is he? And Dr. Harding?" I asked, my voice trembling. Veronica let out a short, almost derogatory laugh. "We decided to hire new representation, someone more, current." The way she said it, with that condescending tone, made me feel small, insignificant. But I swallowed hard and invited them in. We sat in the living room, the room where we had celebrated so many Christmases, so many birthdays, so many happy moments. Now it felt like a courtroom. The lawyers opened their briefcases and took out mountains of documents. Julian sat across from me, with Veronica at his side like a venomous shadow. Matthew and Emily positioned themselves at the ends, as if they wanted to disappear. "All right, Mom," Julian began with a tone I had never heard from him, a tone of absolute superiority. "We've been reviewing all the assets Dad left behind. The company, the properties, the investments, the bank accounts. It's a lot of money, a lot of assets to manage." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. My heart was pounding, but I still didn't understand where this was going. "We've decided to divide everything equally among the 3 of us," he continued, pointing to himself, Matthew, and Emily. "The company will, of course, be under my direction. We'll divide the properties based on market value. We'll split the investments into equal parts." He spoke as if he were in a business meeting, not as if he were in front of his newly widowed mother. But what came next was the blow that knocked the wind out of my lungs. "You weren't included for a reason, Mom," he said, looking me directly in the eyes, without a shred of emotion. The world stopped. The words echoed in my ears as if spoken in slow motion. Not included? In my own husband's inheritance? In the estate he and I built together for nearly half a century? What? It was the only thing I could articulate. My voice sounded broken, weak. Veronica leaned forward, wearing that smile I hated so much. "Eleanor, let's be realistic. You never worked. You never contributed anything financially to the family. Robert built everything. He was the one who worked, who invested, who took the risks. You just stayed at home." I felt as if I had been slapped. Never contributed anything? Were 48 years of my life dedicated to this family worth nothing? The sleepless nights caring for sick children? The meals prepared with love? The unconditional support for Robert in every decision? In every difficult moment? Was all of that no contribution? "Besides," Julian continued, "you're already 72 years old. You don't need much to live on. We've decided to give you a monthly allowance of $2,000. It's more than enough for someone your age. You can rent a small apartment, live out your last years peacefully." He spoke of me as if I were already dead, as if I were a burden to be disposed of in the most economical way possible. Matthew finally spoke, his voice muffled. "Mom, it's for the best. The company needs capital. There are investments to make. We can't have the money tied up in." He stopped, but I completed the sentence in my mind, "in a useless old woman." Emily remained silent, wringing her hands in her lap, unable to look at me. At least she seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. But her silence was complicity. Her lack of defense was betrayal. "You can't decide that," I said, trying to sound firm, though my voice trembled. "Your father's will." Julian cut me off with a dry laugh. "The will you know about is old. Mom, Dad made changes shortly before he died. And in those changes, he made it very clear that the company and the assets should pass to his children. To us, the ones who work, the ones who will build the Romero family legacy." One of the lawyers, a thin man with thick glasses, began reading documents in a monotone voice. He spoke of clauses, percentages, asset divisions. I didn't understand any of it. The words jumbled in my head. I could only think of Robert, of how he had promised he would always protect me. How could he have left me in this situation? How could he abandon me like this? "This house will also be sold," Veronica announced, looking around with those calculating eyes. "It's worth approximately $1,200,000. The money will be divided among the 3 heirs. You have 30 days to move out. Eleanor." She called me by my name. Not Mom, not mother-in-law. Just Eleanor, as if I were a tenant behind on rent. Something inside me broke at that moment. This was my home, the house where I raised my children, where I loved my husband, where I built every memory of my adult life. And they were kicking me out like trash. I stood up, my legs trembling. Tears were beginning to blur my vision, but I refused to cry in front of them. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. "I need a moment," I said in a broken voice, and walked to the kitchen, leaving them in the living room. I heard muffled laughter, murmurs of satisfaction. Veronica said something about it being about time. She understood her place. In the kitchen, I gripped the edge of the sink, trying to breathe. My reflection in the window showed a broken woman with 72 years of life dedicated to a family that was now discarding her like old furniture. How had it come to this? When did my children become these cruel, greedy, ungrateful people? I remembered when Julian was little and got pneumonia. I spent 5 nights without sleep by his side, praying, wiping his forehead with damp cloths, feeding him with a spoon when he could barely swallow. Robert was working, and I was his entire world in those moments of sickness. When he finally got better, he hugged me and said, "You're the best mom in the world." Where was that boy now? What had happened to him? I remembered when Matthew had his first heartbreak at 16 years old. He cried in my arms for hours while I stroked his hair and told him everything would be okay, that he would find true love. Robert was on a business trip, and I was the one who comforted him, who helped him heal. How could that same Matthew now be sitting in my living room, allowing them to destroy me? I remembered when Emily got married, and I spent 6 months helping her plan every detail of her wedding. We chose the dress, the flowers, the menu together. I paid for half of it with my personal savings, money Robert gave me monthly that I saved carefully. I gave her $20,000 so she could have the wedding of her dreams. And now she couldn't even defend me. I took a deep breath and returned to the living room. I had to maintain my composure. I had to fully understand what was happening before I reacted. "I want to see that will," I said with the firmest voice I could muster. Julian smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't worry about those technical details, Mom. Just trust us. We're your children. We would never hurt you." The hypocrisy of those words was like a knife in my heart. Never hurt me? What was this then? Veronica continued reviewing papers with one of the lawyers, discussing property values as if they were at an auction. "The beach house is worth $800,000, she said, pointing to a photograph. "I want that one. Julian can have the apartment building downtown." They were talking about the properties Robert and I bought together, places where we spent happy summers, where we made family memories. And they were dividing them up like playing cards. Matthew finally showed some humanity. "And Mom? Where is Mom going to live?" Veronica looked at him with disdain. We already said, Matthew. With $2,000 a month, she can rent something comfortable. There are plenty of small apartments available. She can even get roommates if she wants to save money. The idea that I, Eleanor Romero, who had lived in a 6-bedroom mansion, would end up sharing an apartment with strangers at 72 years old was so absurd it almost made me laugh. But it wasn't funny. It was a nightmare. I'm not going to accept this, I said finally, my voice trembling but determined. I'm going to contact Dr. Harding. He knows all of your father's legal affairs. He will tell me the truth. Julian stood up abruptly. His face hardened. Dr. Harding doesn't work for this family anymore. We fired him. And if you try to contact him or cause problems, Mom, things will get very difficult for you. Was he threatening me? Was my own son threatening me? Difficult in what way? I asked, feeling fear creep up my spine. Veronica stepped closer, her expensive perfume invading my personal space. Eleanor, you're an elderly woman. It would be terrible if people started to question your mental health. It would be a shame if we had to have you committed somewhere for your own protection. The threat was crystal clear. If I resisted, if I fought, they would declare me mentally incompetent. They would lock me up and take total control of everything. My breathing quickened. Panic began to take hold. I was alone, vulnerable, and they knew it. The following days were a calculated psychological torture. Julian began bringing experts to my house without warning. An appraiser who measured rooms and took photographs. A real estate agent who walked the property talking about market potential. They even brought a psychiatrist, a severe-looking man who tried to give me a routine exam to ensure I was handling the grief well. I refused to speak with him. I locked my bedroom door and didn't come out until they left. But I heard their voices in the hallway. She's showing clear signs of severe depression, the psychiatrist said. She might need intervention. They were building a case against me, documenting every moment of weakness to use against me. I stopped eating. I lost almost 20 pounds in 2 weeks. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Julian's cold face telling me I wasn't included for a reason. I saw Veronica smiling as she planned to sell my home. I saw Matthew and Emily looking away, too cowardly to defend me, but complicit enough to benefit from my destruction. One afternoon, while looking through old photographs trying to find solace in memories, I found a box in Robert's closet. A wooden box with a small lock. I had never seen it before. I searched the room for the key until I found it hidden inside one of his favorite books. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens of handwritten letters from Robert. The first one was addressed to me. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Forgive me for not preparing you better, but I needed to protect you in a way you will only understand soon. Our children have changed, my love. I overheard them 6 months ago, planning how to divide everything once I died. They spoke of you as if you were an obstacle, a nuisance. Veronica told Julian they needed to find a way to leave you with the minimum, that you didn't deserve anything because you never worked. Hearing that broke my heart. The tears fell onto the paper as I kept reading. So I took action, my love. I changed the will. Everything, absolutely everything is in your name. The company, the properties, the investments, the bank accounts. The $5 million are yours. Nothing for them. Zero. If they want anything, they will have to earn it by proving they are worthy of being called your children. Dr. Harding has all the documents. Trust him. Trust me. I love you eternally, Robert. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. Was it possible? Had Robert really done that? I kept digging through the box and found more documents. Copies of recorded conversations. Transcripts of text messages between Julian and Veronica, where they planned every detail of how to handle me after Robert's death. There was even a video. With trembling hands, I inserted the USB drive into my laptop. Robert's image appeared on the screen, sitting in his study, looking tired but determined. Eleanor, my love, if you are seeing this, it's because our children tried to do exactly what I feared. I want you to know that every decision I made thinking of you. You deserve everything we have because we built it together. Your sacrifice, your love, your dedication were worth as much or more than any deal I ever made. The lawyers Julian hired have no power. The only valid will is the one registered with Dr. Harding. Go to him, show him this letter, and he will explain everything. Fight, my love. Don't let them destroy you. Show them who Eleanor Romero really is. I didn't sleep a second that night. I sat on Robert's side of the bed, hugging that wooden box as if it were a sacred treasure, because that's exactly what it was. It held the truth. My husband had protected me, even from beyond the grave. He had seen the betrayal coming and had acted. But now I had to decide what to do with that information. For a moment, I considered just showing up before Julian with the documents, screaming the truth in their faces, watching them crumble. But something stopped me. A voice in my head, perhaps Robert's, told me to wait, that I needed a plan. They had planned this for months, maybe years. I couldn't just react emotionally. The next morning, I forced myself to eat. I needed to regain my strength. I needed to think clearly. I reviewed all the documents in the box again. There were audio recordings of conversations between Julian and Veronica, discussing how to manage the old woman once Robert died. In one of them, Veronica said, "$2,000 a month is too generous. $1,500 is enough. That leaves more dividends for us." Hearing that turned my stomach. It wasn't just about the money. It was about how much contempt they felt for me, how much they had devalued me. Veronica continued in that recording, "Your mother is a freeloader who never contributed anything. If Robert hadn't met her, she'd probably still be a poor teacher her whole life. We did her a favor letting her live this life of luxury." Julian laughed. My son laughed while his wife insulted me, and then he said something that chilled my blood. "When she finally dies, we'll sell whatever she has left and split that too. Hopefully, she won't last long. She's already 72 years old. They were waiting for me to die, planning my funeral before I had even gotten over my husband's." There was more. Text messages between the three siblings. Matthew had written, "Are you guys sure about this? I feel bad for Mom." And Julian replied, "Matt, grow up. This is business. Mom had an easy life thanks to Dad. Now it's our turn." Emily had written, "What if she gets mad and cuts us out of her life?" Julian answered, "Even better. Then we won't have to pretend to care at holidays." Every word was a stab, but it was also fuel. Fuel for the fire that was beginning to grow inside me. It wasn't just pain I felt anymore. It was indignation. It was rage. A clean, righteous anger that gave me clarity for the first time in weeks. I called Dr. Samuel Harding from a payphone. I couldn't risk Julian monitoring my calls, and after everything I'd discovered, nothing seemed impossible. Dr. Harding answered on the third ring. "Mrs. Eleanor," he said, his warm voice making me want to cry with relief. "I've been expecting your call." "You knew?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You knew what Robert did?" There was a long pause. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Robert came to my office 6 months ago. He was very upset. He showed me recordings of his children, planning how to divide everything after his death. He asked me to draft a new will, leaving you as the sole heir to his entire estate. He made me swear not to tell you anything until after his passing." The tears were streaming down my cheeks, but my voice held firm. "Julian says they fired you. That you no longer represent the family." Dr. Harding let out a bitter laugh. "Julian has no power to fire me, Mrs. Eleanor. I represent Mr. Roberts' estate, and according to his valid and legal will, you are the owner of everything. Julian has no authority over anything." "I need to see you," I said. "I need to know exactly what my legal position is. Come to my office tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning. And, Mrs. Eleanor, bring the documents Mr. Robert left for you. We will need them." "How did you know about the documents, mister?" "Robert told me exactly where he would hide them. He said you would find them when you were ready. And from your call, I see that time has come." That night, Julian showed up at my house unannounced. He used his key, the one I should have taken back, but, in my naivety, still let him have. He walked in as if he owned the place, which was ironic considering what I now knew. "Mom, I came to talk to you," he said in a conciliatory tone that didn't fool me for a second. "About what?" I asked, keeping my distance. He sat in Robert's favorite armchair, the one where his father spent afternoons reading the newspaper. Seeing Julian there enraged me, but I didn't show it. "I know this has all been difficult for you," he began softly, acting. "Veronica thinks I was too hard on you the other day. Maybe we can increase your monthly allowance to $3,000. What do you think? $1,000 more. As if that would compensate for stealing my entire life." "And in exchange for what?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Julian smiled. That smile that was once charming but now just looked calculating. "We just need you to sign some papers. Property transfers, company documents, legal formalities. Nothing important. Nothing important," I repeated. "Like signing my entire life over to you?" His smile wavered. "Mom, don't be dramatic. Dad would have wanted the company to continue, to thrive. I can do that. You can just enjoy your retirement without any worries." "Retirement from what?" I finally exploded. "From being your mother? From raising you? From sacrificing my entire life for this family?" Julian stood up, his mask of the concerned son falling away. "Sacrificed your life?" he repeated with sarcasm. "You lived in mansions. You traveled the world. You had everything you ever wanted. Don't give me that martyr routine. Dad worked. You just spent." His words were like venom injected directly into my heart. But I was no longer the broken woman from a few days ago. "Get out of my house," I said in a cold voice. Julian laughed. "Your house? Mom, this isn't your house anymore. In 2 weeks, you have to be out of here. Use them to start accepting reality." He walked to the door but stopped. "And another thing. If you get any stupid ideas, like trying to contact old Harding or cause legal trouble, we have medical documentation that proves you're not right in the head. Understand?" He slammed the door, leaving me shaking with rage. But this time, it wasn't helpless rage. It was rage with direction, with purpose. I went up to my room and took out Robert's box. I reviewed every document, every recording, every piece of proof. And then, I found something I had overlooked before. A manila folder labeled Plan B. Inside was a notarized document where Robert detailed not only the new will but also a series of specific clauses. If the children attempted to declare Eleanor mentally incompetent, they would automatically forfeit any right to claim future inheritance. If they tried to take control of properties before the official reading of the will, they would be prosecuted for fraud. Robert had thought of everything. But there was more. Robert had documented every financial contribution I had made to the family over the years. The $20,000 I gave Emily for her wedding, the $30,000 I lent Julian for his first car, the $15,000 I gave Matthew for the down payment on his house. All documented, with dates, receipts, signed contracts, loans they never paid back, which they considered gifts but were legally debts. And finally, at the bottom of the folder, there was one more letter. "Eleanor, if you've made it this far, it means our children have shown their true colors. It means they tried to destroy you just as I feared they would. Now you must make a decision. Dr. Harding has instructions to hold the public reading of the will exactly 3 weeks after my funeral. That will be your opportunity. You can show up, confront them with the truth in front of witnesses, or you can let Harding handle it discreetly. The choice is yours. But my love, if you decide to face them, do it with your head held high. Show them that Eleanor Romero was never weak. She was just loving, and they mistook love for weakness. That was their mistake, not yours." The morning of the will reading dawned with a gray sky that seemed to reflect the storm about to break. I woke up early, earlier than I had in weeks. For the first time since Robert's death, I felt a sense of purpose. I showered calmly, letting the hot water relax every tense muscle in my body. I chose my clothes carefully. An ivory-colored suit Robert had bought me for our 45th anniversary, sensible heels, and the pearls he gave me when Julian was born. I wanted to look impeccable, dignified, unbreakable. I applied my makeup with more care than I had in months. Each stroke of eyeliner was a silent act of war. Each touch of lipstick was armor. I pulled my hair back into an elegant bun and looked in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was no longer the shattered widow who had wept over her husband's casket. She was a warrior preparing for the most important battle of her life. Dr. Harding had called the night before to confirm the details. "The reading will be at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in my office. Your children think it's just a formality, that they're coming to hear the division of assets they already decided on. They don't know I have the real will. Eleanor, are you ready for this? Once we walk through that door, there's no turning back. I had answered him with a firm voice. I've been ready since the moment my son told me I wasn't included for a reason. I arrived at Dr. Harding's office 15 minutes early. He greeted me personally, taking my hands in his with paternal warmth. Mrs. Eleanor, you look beautiful. Mr. Robert would be so proud to see you like this. His words gave me strength. He led me to his private office, where we reviewed everything one last time. The documents were organized in brown folders, each meticulously labeled. When your children arrive, they will act as if this is their territory, Dr. Harding warned me. They will try to intimidate you, to make you feel small. But remember, you hold all the power here. The will is irrefutable. It is registered, notarized, and attested by 3 independent witnesses. There is no legal way to challenge it. I nodded, feeling the determination solidify in my chest like steel. At 3 o'clock sharp, I heard voices in the reception area. Julian arrived with Veronica, their voices cheerful, confident. Matthew and Emily followed silently. I heard the secretary instruct them to go to the conference room. Dr. Harding looked at me. It's time. I stood up, smoothed my suit, and walked toward my destiny. The conference room was large, with a long, dark wood table surrounded by leather chairs. Julian and Veronica were already seated at the head of the table, as if they owned the place. Matthew and Emily sat on the sides. When I walked in, the silence was instant and heavy. Julian looked at me with a mixture of surprise and annoyance. What are you doing here, Mom? This is for the heirs. Before I could answer, Dr. Harding entered behind me, carrying his briefcase. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. And Julian, your mother is here because she has every right to be. In fact, her presence is mandatory for this procedure. Julian exchanged a look with Veronica. We hired other lawyers. You no longer represent this family. Dr. Harding smiled with the calm that only absolute certainty provides. You have no authority to hire or fire anyone, Julian. I represent the estate of Robert Romero, and by extension, his legal heir. Now, if everyone can please take a seat, we will proceed with the official reading of the will. Veronica scoffed. This is ridiculous. We already know what the will says. We've already made all the arrangements. Then you'll have no problem hearing the official version, Dr. Harding replied, unfazed. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document bound in dark green leather. The notary seals shined under the fluorescent lights. This is the last will and testament of Robert Enrique Romero, drafted on March 15th of this year, 6 months prior to his passing. Julian sat up sharply in his chair. That's impossible. The will we have is from 5 years ago. Dr. Harding looked at him directly. The document you have is obsolete. It was revoked and replaced by this new will, which I hold in my hands. I will now proceed with the reading. There was a moment of tense silence. I could see the wheels turning in Julian's head, trying to understand what was happening. Go on, he finally said, his voice controlled but tight. Dr. Harding cleared his throat and began to read. I, Robert Enrique Romero, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby declare this document to be my last will. First, I wish to express that every decision contained herein was made after careful consideration and with full awareness of its implications. The room was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. Dr. Harding continued, throughout my life, I built a considerable estate, but none of it would have been possible without the unconditional support, infinite love, and constant sacrifice of my wife, Eleanor Maria Romero. She was my partner in everything, even if she never held an official title. She was my counselor, my strength, my reason for working every day. Veronica snorted, but Dr. Harding silenced her with a look. Therefore, I declare the following. I leave the entirety of my estate, including but not limited to all real estate properties, bank accounts, investments, shares in the Romero Real Estate Company, vehicles, and any other assets in my name, to my wife, Eleanor Maria Romero. The words fell like bombs in the room. Julian shot to his feet so abruptly his chair fell backward. That's impossible. He wouldn't do that. Veronica was pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Matthew's eyes were wide in shock. Emily began to cry silently. "Let him finish," Dr. Harding ordered with an authoritative voice. "As for my children, Julian, Matthew, and Emily, I leave them the following message. I have loved you from the moment you were born. I gave you everything in my power to give: education, opportunities, unconditional love. But in the final months of my life, I discovered that this love was not reciprocated in the same way." Dr. Harding paused, letting the words sink in. "I heard your conversations about how to divide my assets before I was even gone. I heard how you spoke of your mother, my wife, as if she were a burden to be discarded. I heard your plans to leave her with the bare minimum, to take her home, to treat her as if 48 years of dedication were worth nothing." Julian tried to interrupt, but Dr. Harding raised his hand. "Therefore, my children will inherit no material goods from me. If Eleanor, in her infinite kindness which I do not deserve for her to have toward you, decides to share anything with you, that will be her decision. But I am leaving you nothing. Not one single dollar. Not one single property. Nothing. Maybe this way you will learn the true value of things." "This is insane," Veronica shouted. "He wasn't in his right mind. He was sick. We will contest this." Dr. Harding pulled more documents from his briefcase. The will was drafted 6 months before his death, when Robert was in perfect mental health. I have here medical certificates from 3 different doctors confirming his mental capacity. I have video recordings where he explains his reasoning. And I have testimonies from 3 independent witnesses who were present during the signing. He laid it all on the table, an arsenal of irrefutable evidence. "But that's not all," he continued, his voice growing firmer. "Mr. Robert also documented all the conversations he overheard. The recordings where you plan how to manage the old woman. The text messages where you calculate how much longer your mother will live. The conversations where you decide $2,000 a month is too generous for the woman who raised you." He pressed a button on the laptop he had brought, and the voices of Julian and Veronica filled the room. "Your mother is a freeloader who never contributed anything," Veronica's voice echoed in the recording. "When she finally dies, we'll sell whatever she has left," Julian's voice replied, with a laugh that now sounded monstrous in the quiet room. Matthew stood up, staggering. His face had lost all color. "Dad recorded us. Oh my God, Dad recorded us." His voice was broken, filled with the horror of realizing the magnitude of their betrayal. Emily was sobbing openly now, her wails filling the spaces between the venomous words still coming from the speakers. Dr. Harding let the recording play for 2 more minutes. Every second was a stab of truth that could not be denied or hidden. When he finally stopped the recording, the silence that followed was deafening. Julian was standing by the window, his hands shaking with rage or fear, maybe both. Veronica stared blankly at the table, her mask of superiority completely disintegrated. "There's more," Dr. Harding said, pulling out another folder. Text messages between the 3 siblings. Emails discussing strategies to have your mother declared incompetent. Documents where you falsified information about her mental state. He placed photographs on the table, enlarged screenshots of conversations they thought were private. Julian writing, "If the old woman resists, I have a psychiatrist who will sign whatever we need for $5,000. Veronica replying, "Perfect. We'll stick her in a home and take total control with a court order." Matthew asking, "Isn't that illegal?" And Julian answering, "Only if we get caught." "Conspiracy to commit fraud," Dr. Harding said in a cold voice. "Attempted illegal appropriation of assets, falsification of medical documents. Each of these acts is a serious crime, Mr. Robert gathered all this evidence not only to protect his wife, but also to ensure that if you tried anything, there would be real legal consequences." He pulled out another document, this one with an official red seal. "This is a preventative restraining order. If any of you approach Mrs. Eleanor with threatening intent, if you attempt to contact her to intimidate her, or if you make any move to harm her, you will be arrested immediately." Julian finally exploded. "She manipulated him. That bitch poisoned him against us. Dad never would have done this on his own." His words dripped with venom, but they no longer affected me. I remained seated with my back straight, my hands folded in my lap, watching him with a calm I never knew I possessed. "Doctor," Harding slammed his fist on the table. "Enough! I will not tolerate you disrespecting your mother in my presence. Your father made these decisions alone, after hearing with his own ears the cruelty you are capable of." He pressed another button, and Robert's image appeared on the screen projected on the wall. My husband, my love, recorded 3 weeks before his death. He looked tired, sick, but his eyes burned with determination. "If you are watching this," Robert began in the video, "it is because you tried to do exactly what I feared." His voice filled the room like a ghost returned to deliver justice. "Julian, Matthew, Emily, you are my children, and I will always love you. But love does not mean being blind to your faults. I heard you planning how to get rid of your mother as if she were trash. The woman who left her career to raise you. The woman who spent sleepless nights by your side when you were sick. The woman who sacrificed her dreams so you could chase yours." Robert coughed on the screen, clearly weak, but he continued with a firm voice. "Eleanor never worked outside the home, it's true. Do you know why? Because I asked her not to. Because I wanted our children to have a present mother. Because I valued her role in our family more than any salary she could have earned. And she agreed, sacrificing her financial independence, trusting that I would care for her, trusting that you, her children, would respect her." Tears streamed down my face, but I made no effort to hide them. To see Robert defending my worth, explaining what I could never articulate, was both cathartic and heartbreaking. "Every dollar I earned was possible because she held our home together," Robert continued. "While I was closing deals, she was raising our children with values you have clearly forgotten. While I traveled building the empire you now covet, she kept our family united. She was my partner in every real sense, even if no legal document named her as such. Until now." Robert leaned into the camera, his eyes staring directly, as if he could see through time. "Julian, I gave you everything. The best education, opportunities in my company, my constant guidance, and you paid me back with betrayal. Veronica, you were never truly welcome in this family. I tried to give you the benefit of the doubt, but I saw your greed from the beginning. Matthew, Emily, you are weaker than you are evil. You let Julian lead you, but complicity is just as serious as the initiative." Robert's image paused for a moment as he caught his breath. "That is why everything goes to Eleanor. She will decide what to do with our estate. If she wants to share it with you, despite everything, that will be her decision, and I will respect it from wherever I am. But I am giving you nothing. You have to earn her forgiveness, prove you are worthy of being called her children, and frankly, after what you did, I doubt you will succeed." The video ended with Robert looking at the camera with infinite sadness. "I love you, Eleanor. Forgive me for not being stronger in life to defend you better. But in death, I will make sure you are never unprotected." The screen went black, and the silence was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if Robert's ghost were still in the room, judging them with his gaze. Finally, Emily broke the silence with a choked sob. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She got up from her chair and tried to approach me, but I raised my hand, stopping her. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Not yet, Emily. Apologies don't erase actions." Matthew had his head in his hands. His shoulders were shaking. "We should have been better," he muttered over and over. "Dad was right. We should have been better." But Julian showed no remorse, only a contained fury that made his jaw tense and his fists clench. "This isn't over," he said in a low, threatening voice. "We will contest the will. We'll find better lawyers. We'll prove he was sick, confused, manipulated." "Doctor," Harding laughed humorlessly. "Try it, Julian. I have here the names of the 3 best law firms in the city. They all declined to take your case because I showed them the evidence. No respectable lawyer will touch this. The will is airtight. The proof is irrefutable. And if you insist on causing trouble, I have instructions from your father to file criminal charges for attempted fraud." He pulled out another document, this one with the letterhead of the district attorney's office. "This is a preliminary criminal complaint, already prepared. It just needs my signature to be activated. Do you really want to go down that road?" Veronica finally spoke, her voice a venomous hiss. This is a nightmare. Everything was planned perfectly, and this stupid. She looked at me with pure hatred. You ruined everything. You were just an obstacle we had to remove, and now we're left with nothing. Her brutal honesty was almost refreshing. At least she was no longer pretending. I hate you, she spat the words. I've always hated you. With your martyr attitude, your false humility, your way of making everyone see you as a saint. You're pathetic. I stood up slowly, every movement deliberate and controlled. I walked toward Veronica until I was standing in front of her, our faces separated by barely 2 feet. Veronica, I said, my voice soft but loaded with steel. You will live the rest of your life knowing that your greed cost you $5 million. Every time you look at Julian, you will remember that because of your poison, he lost everything. That will be your prison. I don't need to hate you. Your own conscience will be punishment enough. I turned to my children. Julian, Matthew, Emily. You are my children, and that will never change. But right now, I don't recognize you. I don't recognize what you've become. My voice broke slightly, but I continued. Robert gave you one last chance to redeem yourselves, to show that there is still something good in you. Now it's up to you whether you take it or not. Julian looked at me with a mixture of hatred and something that might have been pain. And what are we supposed to do now? Grovel? Beg? Become your pets, waiting for whatever scraps you decide to throw us? I stepped closer to him, my firstborn son, the boy who was once my pride. You're supposed to learn, Julian. Learn the real value of things. Learn that money isn't the most important thing. Learn that family is built on love, not inheritance calculations. I walked out of that office with my head held high, leaving behind 3 stunned children and a daughter-in-law poisoned by hatred. Dr. Harding walked me to my car, carrying the briefcase with all the documents that now belonged to me. Mrs. Eleanor, he said before I got in, what comes next may be harder than what you just went through. They won't give up easily. I looked him in the eye and nodded. I know, but Robert gave me the tools to defend myself, and this time, I won't back down. The following days were a whirlwind of contradictory emotions. On one hand, I felt immense relief knowing that Robert had protected me, that I wasn't alone, that I had been right to feel something was wrong. On the other hand, the pain of my children's betrayal tore me apart. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was still awake, staring at my bedroom ceiling, wondering at what point everything had fallen apart so badly. The first attack came 2 days after the will reading. A social media post appeared on Veronica's profile. A photograph of me from 20 years ago, when my hair was still completely dark and my skin unwrinkled, with a caption that read, "When a woman manipulates a sick man to take everything he built with his hard work, when the children who cared for him for years are stripped of their inheritance by a manipulator, real justice will come." The post went viral within hours. The comments were brutal. People who didn't know me, who had never heard my side of the story, called me a gold digger, calculating, a manipulator. Veronica had woven a perfect narrative. The greedy widow who poisoned her dying husband's mind against his own children. She shared photographs of Julian, Matthew, and Emily working hard at the family company, though I knew Julian barely showed up twice a week and the other 2 didn't even work there. She created a story of dedicated children, unjustly disinherited by an evil stepmother, even though I was their biological mother. My phone started receiving calls from unknown numbers. Hateful messages, veiled threats, insults that made me tremble. Old thief. Give them back what's theirs. I hope you die soon, so your children can get what they deserve. Disgusting manipulator, hell is waiting for you. Every message was a blow, but something in me had hardened. I was no longer the Eleanor who cried in silence. I was the woman Robert believed I could be. I called Dr. Harding. They are defaming me publicly. What can I do? His response was immediate. We can sue for defamation and slander. I have all the legal resources ready. But Mrs. Eleanor, this is going to escalate before it gets better. Are you prepared for a war? I closed my eyes and thought of Robert, of his video, of his words, asking me to be strong. I'm prepared, I replied in a firm voice. The defamation lawsuit was filed 2 days later. Veronica, Julian, Matthew, and Emily were formally served. We were asking for $500,000 for damages to my reputation and an immediate cease and desist of all defamatory publications. Julian's response came that same night, not through lawyers but directly to my door. He pounded so hard I thought he would break it down. When I opened it, his face was red with fury. "Now you're suing us? Your own children?" he yelled without even a greeting. Behind him, I could see a car where Veronica was waiting, watching the scene like a vulture. "You are defaming me publicly," I replied, maintaining my calm. "You are destroying my name with lies. What did you expect me to do?" Julian laughed bitterly. "Your name? What name, Mom? You're a nobody. The only reason anyone knows you is because you married Dad. Without him, you're nothing." His words should have destroyed me, but instead, something inside me hardened even more. "You're right about one thing," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "I married your father, and together we built a life, a family, a legacy. But you, Julian, what have you built on your own? Everything you have, everything you are, we gave you, and look how you use it to attack your own mother." His hand flew up, and for a moment I thought he was going to hit me, but he stopped, breathing hard. "Are you going to drop that lawsuit?" he said in a low, threatening voice. "Or will you regret this?" I closed the door in his face without another word. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I immediately called the police to report the threat. I also called Dr. Harding, who advised me to install security cameras all over the house. "We cannot underestimate what they are capable of," he warned. The next day, a team installed 6 cameras covering every angle of the property. I also hired private security to patrol the area at night. Veronica's response to the lawsuit was to escalate the media war. She gave an interview on a local TV show, crying in front of the cameras, talking about how the family had been torn apart by greed. She described Robert as a confused man in his final days, easily manipulated. She painted me as a cold woman who had isolated him from his children, who had controlled every aspect of his life. It was lie after lie, but it was so well acted that even I almost believed her for a second. The segment was titled "Mother or Monster: The Battle for a Multi-Million-Dollar Inheritance." They showed me in old photographs, always serious, always in the background, and used that as evidence of my supposed calculating nature. They showed Julian, Matthew, and Emily crying, talking about how their father had been their hero and how they had now lost him and their inheritance. The narrative was powerful because it appealed to basic emotions. Loyal children betrayed by a greedy mother. I received hundreds of hateful messages after that program. My mailbox filled with threatening letters. Someone painted "thief" on my garage door in red spray paint. I had to clean it off at 3 o'clock in the morning, sobbing as I scrubbed the letters that looked like they were written in blood. The security cameras captured 2 young men doing it, likely hired by Julian. Dr. Harding used the video as additional evidence in our lawsuit, but the worst betrayal came a week later. Emily posted an open letter on her social media profile. "To my mother," it began. "I grew up believing you were a good, sacrificial, loving woman, but now I see it was all an act. You manipulated Dad when he was at his most vulnerable. You stole from us what he wanted us to have. And the worst part is, you don't show a shred of remorse. I hope you can live with your conscience, because I can't live with the image of what you really are." Reading those words from my daughter, my only daughter, the girl I had carried in my arms, whom I had comforted in her worst moments, was like a direct stab to the heart. Emily had always been the most sensitive, the most empathetic. I thought she at least would understand, that she would defend me. But Julian had convinced her, or the family pressure had broken her, or perhaps the money was just more important than her mother. Whatever the reason, it hurt more than anything Julian or Veronica had said. That night, I pulled out an old shoebox where I kept letters and drawings my children had made when they were little. I found one from Emily, drawn when she was 7 years old. It was a picture of the 2 of us holding hands under a yellow sundae. Above it, in shaky handwriting, it said, "My mom is the best in the world. I love her more than the stars." I cried, holding that piece of paper, wondering where that little girl had gone, at what point love had turned to resentment. But among the tears, I also found something else in that box. A letter Robert had written to me on our 30th anniversary. Eleanor, my eternal love, it's been 30 years since you became my wife, and every day I love you more than the last. You are the reason I get up every morning. The children we raised, the life we built. It's all thanks to you. I promise to protect you always, in this life and the next. Yours for eternity, Robert. Reading those words, I felt a renewed clarity. Robert had protected me. He had given me the weapons to defend myself. Now it was up to me to honor his memory by using those weapons wisely. The next day, I hired a public relations firm. I need to tell my side of the story, I told them. But I don't want fake tears or television drama. I want dignity, truth, and justice. They prepared a complete strategy. Interviews with serious media outlets, documentation of all of Veronica's lies, testimonies from people who truly knew Robert and me. The first interview was with a respected journalist known for his integrity and depth. I sat in front of the cameras dressed simply, with no excessive makeup or flashy jewelry, just me, my truth, and the proof Robert had left. Mrs. Eleanor, the journalist began in a calm voice, your family has publicly accused you of manipulating your late husband. What do you have to say about that? I took a deep breath and began to speak. My husband Robert was not manipulated by anyone. He was a brilliant, strong, and conscious man until his very last day. The decisions he made alone, after discovering that our children were planning to strip me of everything once he was gone. There was silence. Can you prove that? The journalist asked. I nodded, and Dr. Harding, who was present in the studio, began to play the recordings. The voices of Julian and Veronica filled the television set. Their cruel words, their cold calculations, their contempt for me were exposed to millions of viewers. The journalist's face gradually changed from skeptical to horrified. When the playback finished, he looked at me with different eyes. This is extraordinary, he murmured. Do your children know these recordings exist? They do now, I replied calmly. They heard them during the will reading, and instead of showing remorse, they escalated their attacks against me. The interview lasted 45 minutes. I showed Robert's letters, the notarized documents, the medical proof of his full mental capacity. I spoke of 48 years of marriage, of mutual sacrifice, of real love. I didn't cry. I didn't beg for understanding. I just presented facts, irrefutable evidence of the truth. At the end, the journalist asked me, "What do you hope to achieve with all this?" I looked directly at the camera, knowing that Julian, Veronica, Matthew, and Emily would be watching. I want the truth to be known. And I want my children to understand that actions have consequences. The impact was immediate and devastating for them. The social media that had been my executioner became my defender. The comments under Veronica's posts changed from poor family to what ungrateful children. Emily's letter was shared thousands of times, but now with furious criticism aimed at her. How could you betray your mother like that? People wrote. Your father saw you for exactly who you are. Julian tried to give his own interview to counter the damage, but no respectable program would have him. The only ones who opened their doors were tabloid gossip shows, where he looked desperate and unbelievable. During that interview, Julian claimed the recordings were faked, that I had paid actors to create false evidence. But Dr. Harding had already anticipated that tactic. He presented forensic analysis of the recordings, conducted by 3 independent labs, all confirming their authenticity. He also showed the metadata from the recordings, dates, and times that perfectly matched the phone records. Julian was exposed as a liar to the public. The defamation lawsuit moved quickly. The judge, after reviewing all the evidence, ruled in my favor, ordering Veronica, Julian, Matthew, and Emily to pay $300,000 in damages, remove all defamatory posts, and issue a public apology. Furthermore, he imposed a restraining order. They could not speak publicly about me or the will without facing contempt of court charges. The legal victory was important, but the real victory was seeing the truth finally come to light. But the hardest blow for them came when I began to exercise my rights as the owner of Romero Real Estate. Julian had been managing it for years, but now I was the legal owner. I hired external auditors to review all transactions from the last 5 years. What they found was alarming. Julian had been diverting funds, paying himself exorbitant, unauthorized bonuses, and using company money for personal expenses. In total, he had stolen over $400,000. I presented the findings to the board of directors and fired Julian immediately. I also filed criminal charges for embezzlement. The police arrived at his house on a Thursday morning, handcuffing him in front of his neighbors while Veronica screamed hysterically. The images appeared on the news that same night. My son, the man who had called me useless and a freeloader, being arrested for stealing from the company his father built with honesty and hard work. Matthew and Emily contacted me after Julian's arrest. Emily showed up at my house, crying, begging to talk to me. For the first time in months, I opened the door to one of my children. She was haggard, with dark circles under her eyes. She had lost weight. "Mom," she sobbed, falling to her knees in front of me. "Forgive me. Forgive me for everything. You were right. Julian manipulated us. He poisoned us against you. I didn't want to, but I was scared. Scared of being left alone, of being the only one to defend you." I looked at her for a long time. This daughter who had publicly betrayed me, who had written that cruel letter, a part of me wanted to hug her, to forgive her immediately. But another part, the part Robert had strengthened with his last act of love, knew that forgiveness couldn't be that easy. "Emily," I said, my voice soft but firm, "your apology comes after you lost. It comes after Julian was arrested, and you realized there's no money left to recover. Would you have come if he still had power?" She cried harder, unable to answer, because we both knew the truth. Matthew called on the phone. His voice was broken, ashamed. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know I'm sorry. Dad was right about everything. We were selfish, cruel, unworthy of being your children. I'm not asking for money or anything material. I just want you to know I deeply regret it." I hung up without responding. Not because I didn't want to forgive them eventually, but because they needed to understand that words without actions meant nothing. 6 months after the will reading, I sat on my balcony watching the sunrise, a hot cup of coffee in my hands. The storm had passed, leaving behind a completely transformed landscape. Julian was facing criminal charges and had lost all the respect he once had in the business world. Veronica had filed for divorce, fleeing like the rat she always was when the ship began to sink. Matthew and Emily were living with the shame of their actions, trying to rebuild their lives away from the scandal. And I, Eleanor Romero, was still standing, stronger than I ever imagined possible. I had taken control of Robert's company and was running it with the help of competent managers. The numbers were showing growth for the first time in 3 years. Without Julian sabotaging it from within, the business was thriving. But more important than the money was what I had decided to do with it. Using $2 million from the estate, I founded the Romero Hope House, a shelter for vulnerable elderly women. Women who, like me, had dedicated their lives to their families only to be abandoned in their old age. Women who had no resources, who had been discarded, forgotten. The shelter offered dignified housing, medical care, educational programs, and, above all, respect. At the inauguration, with tears in my eyes, I said, "This place exists because my husband taught me that a true legacy isn't the numbers in a bank account, but the lives you touch with love and justice." Robert would have been proud. I could feel his presence in every decision I made, in every moment of strength. The house Julian wanted to sell me had been converted into the administrative center for the shelter. Every room where my children once played now served to help other mothers who had been betrayed by their own. It was a way of transforming pain into purpose, betrayal into redemption. Matthew was the first to show real change. 6 months after the whole scandal, he began volunteering at the Hope House. He didn't tell me directly. He just showed up one Saturday morning offering his services as an engineer to repair electrical and plumbing systems. He worked in silence for weeks, asking for no recognition or forgiveness, just demonstrating with actions that he had learned his lesson. One afternoon, as he was repairing a water heater, I approached him. "Why are you here, Matthew?" I asked. He looked at me, his eyes full of sincere shame and regret. "Because I need to do something good, Mom. I need to try to be the man Dad wanted me to be." I didn't hug him that day, but I nodded. It was a start. Emily took longer, but eventually she also found her path to redemption. She started teaching free interior design classes to the women at the shelter, teaching them skills they could use to generate income. I watched her working with a 68-year-old woman who had been abandoned by her children after she sold her house to pay their debts. Emily had tears in her eyes as she helped the woman create a small decorating business. Perhaps she was finally seeing her own reflection in the pain of others. Julian never apologized. He served 18 months in prison for embezzlement and came out a shadow of the arrogant man he had been. I saw him once, 6 months after his release, in a supermarket. Our eyes met. He lowered his head and quickly walked away. I felt no satisfaction seeing him like that, only a profound sadness for what could have been and never was. He was my son, he always would be, but he was also a stranger who had chosen greed over love. One Sunday afternoon, exactly 1 year after Robert's death, I gathered Matthew and Emily in my home. They had proven for months that their remorse was genuine, that they had learned the real value of things. I showed them 2 folders. "Your father stipulated that if either of you demonstrated true change, I could give you a second chance." I opened the folders, revealing documents for the creation of 2 trust funds. "I am transferring $500,000 to each of you. It is not a gift. It is a zero-interest loan that you will pay back by working at the Hope House for the next 5 years. The money is for you to rebuild your lives, but on one condition: you must use it to build something honorable, something your father would be proud to see." They both cried. Emily hugged me, whispering thank you over and over. Matthew just nodded, unable to speak, his eyes red with emotion. It wasn't complete forgiveness. The wounds were still fresh, but it was a bridge toward healing. Robert had taught me that true love includes boundaries, consequences, and second chances that are earned, not given. Today, 3 years after all of it, I sit on the same balcony, watching the same sunrise. The Hope House has helped over 200 women rebuild their lives. Matthew and Emily work with me at the foundation, redeemed but aware that full forgiveness will take time. Julian lives in another city, working in a small office, estranged from all of us. Sometimes I wonder if he will ever knock on my door, asking for genuine forgiveness. I don't know, but if he does, I will be ready to listen. The Romero Real Estate Company now donates 20% of its annual profits to social causes. Robert built an empire with honest work, and I have made sure that empire has a purpose beyond money. Every property sold, every deal closed, carries his name and his legacy of integrity. I think about Robert every day. Sometimes, I talk to his photograph, tell him what I'm doing, ask him for advice in the silence. And in the quietest moments, I swear I can feel his hand on my shoulder, his voice whispering that he's proud of me. He gave me the chance to prove my strength when the world tried to break me, and I discovered that the greatest inheritance I received wasn't the $5 million, but the certainty of my own worth. At 75 years old, I finally understand what Robert tried to teach our children, and what it took me too long to learn myself. Money is earned, lost, and recovered. But dignity, self-respect, and integrity are treasures that, once lost, may never return. My children learned that the hard way. I learned it through the love of a man who protected me, even after death. This is my story. The story of a woman who was invisible for 48 years, not because she was weak, but because her strength was expressed in ways the world didn't value, until she had to prove that silence is not weakness, that devotion is not subservience, and that sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply to live with dignity while others carry the weight of their own betrayal. And if anyone is going through something similar, if you have been made to feel invisible, useless, remember this: your value never depended on others recognizing it. It was always there, just waiting for the right moment to shine.